All right, guys, we are live again with another Pangburn Hangout. It's Wednesday, so that means ZMO is going to be coming at you with another great discussion. We what did we talk about? Mace Starwalk last Friday. We talked about whether you thought Putin was evil or not. That was very interesting. But yeah, today we got ZMO. We're going to be talking about mythology. If you guys want to come in and chat on Discord with us, feel free to do so. I'm going to drop you guys a link. Make sure you're subscribed and make sure you drop a like if you enjoy these group discussions. Here is the Discord link right there. Yeah, ZMO, I'm going to do some sharing and yeah. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Pangburn. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ZMO show. Today's topic, as Travis said, will be mythology. So I don't have much prepared for a beginning. I really just want to take this conversation wherever it may lead. Hopefully we'll get some more people here in a second. But first, I just want to say that mythology, kind of like the topic I picked last week, psychology or psychopathologies and serial killers, it is a very, very deep topic. We will not solve anything in our small amount of time together. You're going to have to not do that. So with that being said, mythology is incredibly deep, rich, and complex. It's pretty much in all of human civilizations from the earliest civilizations. Some myths make an account of how the world and humans were made, who or what made them, as well as what or who makes things go around. These oftentimes mythology is tied in with sacred meanings, sacred understandings of the world, which might have, specific rituals involving a particular group of people or a particular person participating in the ritual, or a specific time of the year, or at a specific location. Of course, characters in mythology range the vast plethora from anthropomorphic characters to treacherous women characters to angry, evil father god type characters, heroes. All the archetypes run through the mythos, the world of myths. We can talk about, the oldest myths, the beginning of some of the oldest myths, obviously the classical. When I hear mythology, I think of the Greeks and the Romans, Egypt, maybe some Celtic or Norse gods in there. But, in general, there's a lot of mythology from the Americas, from Australia, Oceania, the Aborigines, Africa, that it is just in and of itself incredibly rich, complex, with all kinds of different characters. So yeah, just wanted to make that beginning statement, and I want to say that obviously myths are infused with meaning. It may be how to act in the world, social cues, might tell people everything from when to plant their crops to how to get married to how to lay with your wife. It just totally runs the plethora. So yeah, I mean, if anybody has hey Doolittle, what's up, man? Thanks for joining us.
Hey,
today we're talking about mythology. Yeah, and I was just giving a little preamble about mythology and how it's rich and complex and everything. And I don't really have much prepared. I had this mythology book right here, and I figured I could go through it. I was looking, and this was on my shelf, and that's how I just kind of came up with the talk
book
today.
Or what?
This is all mythology of all the world. So
wow, that's a pretty sick book.
It goes. Not
you got the
too
Bible
bad.
in there? You got the Bible in there?
No, it's not too bad, man. It's it's different contents are introducing mythology than the classical world, Europe, Asia, the Americas, Africa, Oceania, and the who's who. So I saw this on my shelf and I was like, hell, man, that's a deep topic. So maybe we could get into that. So I guess this will bring me to my first jumping off point, I guess. In a lot of the mythologies that are created, it seems that something creates the world, and oftentimes in the stories, the world is then, once everything around the world was created, obviously there's different scenarios, but basically the world is created out of the broken pieces of an animal, right? Or the water is the blood and the earth is the flesh of this dead great being or whatever.
Demeter or something.
Yeah, what do we think about that?
I think it's true.
In what way do you think it's
in
true?
more ways than one.
Okay. You want to elaborate a little bit?
I don't think the person that wrote it knew how true it was when they wrote it. Well, life is a cycle. The world is, if you think about what you're standing on, and you go out in the forest, you're standing on about, most places, about 100 feet of dead matter that's been broken down and reconstituted into the building blocks of the thing that's going to be built on top of it.
Yeah, that's kind of
quite literally, the world is built of dead pieces of animals and plants, and everything you do is, like, all the materials you use outside of stone is a dead plant or animal.
Right. This is sort of mythology's ability to, some mythologies anyways, especially that are still alive, have this kind of ability to take in facts as they're newly understood, and instead of just go ahead believing some old nonsense, they're very malleable, in other words. So like what you just said there could be repurposed to say, oh no, but it is true, it's not exactly as we said it was, right?
Yeah, how about if you're just talking about building a city, like back in the day, you were, let's just say, the modern day city of Istanbul, right? It's built on top of the ruins, the remains of a city below it. Like, if you go and you start digging, you go to Rome, you start digging, you're going to find a city below you. You go to
literally
Jerusalem,
in France and places, they have the catacombs, right?
Yeah, they got, a lot of that is just where they're burying dead people. But But there's cities built on top of cities, like back in the day, thousands of years ago, cities would burn down and they would just make a new foundation out of dirt and just build right on top of it.
Right. Yeah, I didn't really think about it like that, but that is a good point. I suppose there's some truth in that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, like the literal truth of the world's made out of like a tortoise shell or something. Yeah, that's obviously nonsense. It's
sure.
It's a funny story, but in terms of metaphorical truth, I think it's true in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, like you said, like literally with the city. I mean, if it's going to be built, I mean, forget it. Even if you're not building it on a new city, I mean, metaphorically, you're building it on the backs of your ancestors, right? And a lot of the time,
absolutely.
With, back-breaking labor.
I didn't even think about that aspect of it. Yeah, you're building. Let's just say, if you have a set of ideas of how to run your country or how to behave as a society.
Yeah.
And it gets out of control, and it's not really the best way to run a society. Like, you break it down into the things you want to keep and the things you want to throw away, and you build a new thing. You throw in a couple new ideas and reconstruct it from its constituent pieces with some new pieces in there, and maybe some different ideas of how to arrange them, and now you have something that's bigger and stronger. It's going to last longer. Well, hopefully it lasts longer. Like, look at America, like, kind of like started from a monarchy, and we broke that down, and now we have a society that's they took pieces of Plato's Republic or democracies from ancient Greece and broke down to all those ideas and said, well, okay, how are these going to fail, and then put together ways to rearrange our organization so that it's stronger and is going to last longer. I mean, in a lot of the same ways you're talking about building your civilization on the backs of your ancestors, whether it's the back of their work, like maybe your ancestors just built a road from here to there, and then
right, or intellectual properties.
Your intellectual properties. That's another thing entirely, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, so yeah, I mean, you brought up something there. So like, you have a society, and obviously it's no secret that mythology can certainly serve as a sort of moral guide point, right? Do you think that this type of stuff arose? Let me think how to phrase this. Did this stuff come up organically, and then they form myths around it, like how to act, or sexual practices, or how to treat your friends when they come in your home or whatever? Did they do it organically and then they created the myth around it, or did they create the myths and then enact them out? I mean,
I think it's more like in my estimation of how it probably played out over history, it's kind of like how Star Wars is in modern day society. Like, it was just, at first, It was just a movie. Like, back then they would have all kinds of plays and musical theater and fireside storytelling and stuff like that, and the best stories would get repeated over and over again, and have a following of people that believe certain aspects of those stories, or that they would live their life with certain principles. So, like, just think about, like, how many people in our day and age get their ideas of morality from, like what would a Jedi do? You're just thinking about Star Wars, which is obviously false, right? It's obviously fiction. And I don't want to say false, but it's obviously fiction. And so how many people, like millions of people in America, get a sense of morality from Star Wars?
Yeah, I remember I had a drug and alcohol counselor one time, and there was like, in the 12-step program, it's like believe in a power greater than yourself. And he was like, I don't really believe in a God or anything, but he's like, I believe in, something like the Force, like that unites people. So, it was a real example of
someone that believes that shit. It's totally fiction.
I don't think he, obviously I don't know if he literally believe. I mean, I'm sure he didn't literally believe it, as in how it works in Star Wars, but it was his the closest approximation of what he felt was, I guess, close to his beliefs. So
yeah.
But
so,
I mean,
So a lot of these myths are like, there's one called I think it's Demeter and Persephone.
Okay.
What? I might have the name of the story wrong, but so there's a character who is a princess, essentially, and she gets taken hostage by the god of the underworld in some sense. I don't remember exactly how the story goes. It's been decades since I read it. But she goes, and they say, oh, if you take anything with you from the underworld, then it's gonna rule your life, right? It's gonna influence your life when you get back to the real world. So when she's in the underworld she ends up getting saved, but when she's in the underworld, she eats some pomegranate seeds or something like that, right? She's hungry, she eats a pomegranate, and then of course the pomegranate seed was still in her when she gets back to the real world, and that's why we have winter. Like, I don't know, I skipped a couple steps, but okay, so somebody came up with a fanciful story, which is essentially trying to explain some natural phenomenon that people have observed, and they explain it through stories that included in the story are these supernatural beings or gods and demigods, which are people who are like hero type characters like we have in Marvel superhero movies, right? Practically indestructible heroes that have You know, they all have some great character quality that you want to emulate, and they all have some like flaw that ends up like it's not a good story unless the main character's got a flaw. So they all have a flaw,
sure.
and so there's a drama that's enacted and the drama has some moral and some explanatory power, right? So before people really knew why there's a winter, you know, there was a play acted out that explains that you know, has some explanatory power to make people kind of, oh yeah, I guess that could be it. I don't know, but if you're superstitious and you believe that these supernatural beings actually control all the things that are going on, then the mythology is like, it has some explanatory power to bridge the gap between like what these supernatural beings are doing and then what we actually perceive in the real world. So like, you know, Apollo has a chariot, you know, made of fire that he flies across the sky every day. I don't know why, like he's got a habit, I guess, of flying over at the same time every day.
Well, isn't Apollo isn't that just the sun, right?
It's
following the sun, right?
Well, it's Apollo in his chariot flying across the sky, right? So there's some explanatory power, and it personifies natural events, I think, in a lot, and so many of these myths are just the anthropomorphization of natural phenomena. To try to use words that Dan would use.
Yes. Greetings, other people who have joined. Bombay, Lebowski, Kapow. Today we're talking about mythology. I was just talking to Doolittle, and everyone else, about whether he thinks that people created the myths and then they started to enact them, or if they started to, enact them normally and then created them after that.
I mean, like I said, I think it's, for people that are new, I think it probably happened more like Star Wars in modern day, where there's a great story, people want to go watch the play, they want to read the book if they were capable of reading, but mostly these stories were told, around campfires or in a bar with a bard, playing his lute and singing a poem. They would recite poems that would take hours and hours to recite, right? And so these things were passed on through an oral tradition and through play and music and art, and then people loved watching it, and then it's also overlapping with the political structure, which is like the religions at the time, right? So, there was a lot of political involved in religion, and there was a lot of religion involved in political. And so, like, if you were in Athens in 3500 BC, you were a worshiper of Athena, which was the goddess that was the patron goddess of Athens, right? So, like the temple in that, like the high temple or whatever, was the place where all the powerful people would meet and do their politics, and also the most powerful person was probably the priest or the priestess of Athena, and they made the rules. So you do it. Well, why do I have to do that? Well, Athena told me to do it. And then if you have a rich mythology that goes along with that, with some explanatory power, then people can get caught up in the story, right? And so I think it probably happened more like Star Wars, where, like, people get their sense of virtue out of these stories, and like, well, why were they created? I'd say it's 90% art, 10% politics. And the art part of it is just people acting out what they know is right, or good and bad, and expressing themselves in the form of art. And then when other people agree, then they like what they're seeing, and they'll repeat it, and
right. But
and so forth.
Right. But to take the other side of this coin, though, I mean, with the beginning of mythologies, at least, I mean, it seems to be to have arisen just naturally through natural observation, and a lot of the characters personify a human emotion like revenge, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, humans would have had to feel that feeling before making the story, and then they just concocted a mythology out of it later. I mean, I don't think there's one right answer to this, right? I think it's a combination of both, right?
Yeah.
That's the mythology creating itself. What more organically is the word I've used, right? But like the oldest, normally the oldest myth is the Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh, which
Is that the oldest one?
That's what it said on Google. Yeah, it's generally considered about the oldest myth, which is a Sumerian myth. And I mean, people, floods happened all the time. If you were on a flat part of land, the river floods. It could look like literally the whole world floods. And it was obviously a river plain. It was pretty flat. And then they saw this and created a story out of it. But yeah, maybe that's the other side of that coin. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm sure there's another side of the coin.
But I do agree though that for example, I think it was the Assyrian. I don't know. I can't remember which. The Persians. Sorry, the Persians. So the Persians, when they would conquer new territory, and I think the Romans did this as well. If they came upon a people with a different set of beliefs, with a different belief structure, sometimes they would incorporate the new myths into their collection. Isn't that? And I think that's how the Parthenon, right? Is that the house of the gods or whatever?
That's just normal.
What's that, Lebowski?
That's just normal. I mean, like Halloween. Halloween is a pagan holiday that had been absorbed by Christian groups. The winter solstice, which we now consider Jesus' birthday, was accepted by Christian converts because Jesus' birthday was actually in like the summertime. The Easter Bunny, like all these things were actual rituals that had been around for a long time. And the Roman Catholic Church figured, what the best way to get these people to go along with our beliefs is to tie in their own beliefs as well. So now all of a sudden Santa Claus, okay. And then it gets whitewashed of being like, oh, okay, Santa Claus is cool. Even though that's like if you went back to the origins of Christianity, nobody fucking celebrated Santa Claus or Christmas the way we do today.
Right. Isn't there this evil Santa character in some mythologies? Like
Krampus.
It's like, oh yeah, Krampus.
Yep.
Is that it? I thought there was another one called no, it's Krampus. You're right. I thought there might have been another one. It was like Santa's evil twin or something.
Well, I never heard of Krampus.
So Krampus is like, this story of you have this story where it all comes from Holland, right? So people used to leave out their clogs and shit, and Santa Claus would like reward kids with treats in their clogs, is where Krampus would leave coals and twigs. That was the original idea, going all the way back. Now the idea is like Santa Claus just says, "Hey, I keep a list, and if you're good, you get coal and twigs. If you're good, you get presents. If you're bad, you get coals and twigs." It used to be two separate entities that were responsible.
I was thinking Krampus leaves. No, never mind. Bad joke. Travis knew where I was
I know where you're going. Hey, were you talking about Knuckles by chance, Zemo? I'm gonna look
Knuckles?
up. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find Knuckles. But this was a story. Somehow my dad had it on some audio tape, like Christmas audio tape, and I'm gonna see if I can actually find Knuckles.
But I do want to point out something while you're doing that, Trav.
Yeah.
Doc, I think you made an error of judgment when you said, obviously, everybody look at the Marvel stuff and know that it's not real. Like at one point you felt everybody.
So I said fictional. Fictional.
Yeah, fictional, which is that which is not.
No, I said it was false, and then I corrected myself and said fictional.
It's fictional. Okay. Regardless, so there would have been a time when people would say what Thomas Smith was saying with Mormonism is fictional, but over a certain amount of time, all of a sudden it becomes reasonable to a certain amount of people. So it's like I wouldn't say these things are as necessarily as obvious as you think they are.
Now, well, I mean, there's a different, like the people that were following John Smith in the first place weren't saying, bullshit, I don't think there's such a thing as the Archangel Gabriel. I think they already bought into Archangel Gabriel, and then he added something with some more explanatory power on top of it. But now, there's nobody that's worshiping Captain Marvel and thinking that that's a real entity.
Yeah. Not yet. But I mean, that's I really do feel that's a matter of cutting hairs. The reason I don't think people are doing that yet with Captain Marvel is because we still have movies and we still have records. In 1,000 years' time, even the best digital copy of every piece of information that we have now will be gone, and the only thing that we'll have will be stories that will be told. Those stories will be lionized in books again, right?
Yeah.
Well, with modern day superhero movies, it's kind of like, we go to it's been portrayed as obviously a fiction, right? Like, we know who Stan Lee is, we know who created it, but with Joseph Smith, and a church, for example, I mean, they're literally going to preach this stuff over and over in an environment that is exclusionary towards other, stories.
Here's what I have to say. I have to say, if there is this kind of apocalypse, everything gets wiped out, and there's no one left and then they're left to discover things. I hope they discover The Office, the TV show, and create doctrine out of that, instead of finding the Friday the 13th series starring Jason Voorhees as a guide of how to be.
The doctrine out of the Office that they would come up with would be you have to have TPS reports every week, or or you're excommunicated.
Exactly.
This shows a proper syllogism.
Well, do you think there might be any relation
in America?
Well, do you guys think there might be any relation to Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey? Maybe at that time he was just writing books and it got turned into something, hundreds of years later. All of a sudden, people.
No, Scott, I think Homer was the one who wrote it down. Well, I guess no, he was attributed as the author, right? But the Iliad and Odyssey would have been an epic poem that got recited and then passed down across generations, right? So someone's attributed as the author, but Homer lived long after that story. So I think there was probably 1,000 years or several hundred years between when the Battle of Troy, or whatever the Trojan War, whenever that really happened. So there had to be a little bit of a game of telephone in between there.
But that's my point. It's not like you can say, because he wrote it down and this was the actual truth, right? And it also doesn't mean just because he wrote it down, people in the future won't take it as truth. I think we see the same thing with superhero shit right now, right? In 500 years, they're going to be
absolutely, Spider-Man at this point is definitely a mythology.
Yes,
there's no question about it.
Yep.
But so I guess this brings me to my next question. Do y'all see mythology as inherently superstitious and useless, or of some value? We just got to figure out what it is, or What?
Well, it did have value for certain civilizations. People talk a lot about the ancient Greeks and talk about their philosophers and their military power, their naval ships, and they were very intelligent. And they believed in these myths. They believed a lot of them to be real. People being demigods, being part, descendants of Zeus and part human. They believed in this stuff. So it was of importance to their civilization.
Do you think they believed in that? Like, is there any evidence that people believed in that, or
well, they did believe in the
that
gods.
They loved telling that story.
They did believe in the gods and goddesses of Olympus. Somebody earlier was talking about Athena and the temple of Athena. Yeah. They must have believed in her to build that monument for her in Athens.
Well, I mean, quite famously, there's a lot of stuff like.
Believe. Yeah.
No, we're going to have a disagreement.
There's a whole religion called Stoicism, which the people that they're pantheists without superstition is what they called themselves, like, and they didn't they acted as if there is this Zeus. It's kind of like Travis and his free will. They acted as if Zeus exists, but they didn't really believe that there was such a thing as Zeus.
I would say Stoicism is a practice, not really something that's a religion. But to Bombay's point, the Buddhists say we're all connected, and not until thousands of years later do we find out that we're all made of stardust. So, we can look at some of these things. People clearly know something, and I think the term mysticism, or the art of mysticism, which is, I feel like maybe this volcano, it doesn't like me, so maybe we'll scapegoat it by throwing some pigs or a nice virgin in there to make it stop, is a way of thinking. But it is a way that produces really bad results.
But so I don't even.
Hold on. Let me finish. But when you're finishing this way of thinking, and you're saying my results are X, and look at the actions because of your results. That's something to be condemned. But the fact that you're noticing something and actually want to apply like a scientific method to it, or maybe some other methods that give you these truth values, I think there is something to say that there is some value in a little bit of that mysticism, to wait for those tools to show up. Sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like I guess I was going to go down the exact same line that you were going with, like Nostradamus. Like some people will be like, look at all the times Nostradamus was right, but they never look at all the times that Nostradamus was wrong.
Yeah, count all the hits, miss all the misses.
Way more of the times than he was ever right. But anytime people can make some sort of read and say, oh, this is why Nostradamus is right, they get all fucking excited about it. It's like, no, that's not what's happening.
I don't know about whether the right or wrong thing. I mean, my whole point was that depending on the civilization and depending on the time period, those people would have really taken those myths seriously, and they would have seen them as important in helping to shape the way they thought about things, their values.
So Bombay, I would say I would agree that the people in power probably felt those myths were more important than the average actual person. The average actual person who's just farming to get by and hanging out with their family, they probably didn't give two big shits about it. But the people in power, yeah, they fucking were all about it.
Well,
right?
So you think all these myths were just a conspiracy of the powerful to control people, or what?
No, it's not a conspiracy of the power. It's just look at the way human beings operate today, right? I mean, it is just because we've progressed 3,000 years doesn't mean we as biological beings have changed in one iota.
Sure, but our beliefs have.
I think we're overlooking something here. If you take a child today and tell them about Santa Claus, that child grows up believing in Santa Claus till he runs into other people that sort of like knock down that belief. But if you start out telling, your children that superheroes are real and stuff, and for whatever reason, if they don't have any, a couple generations go by, they'll absolutely believe it. I mean, there'll be some skeptics, but people will internally believe that stuff. I would say we have like real world examples now where people, of course they believe it. They were indoctrinated to believe it.
Well, it depends. Again, this is a large topic, and it depends on what section of what part of the world you're talking about, what myth you're talking about. Because I could point to societies right now that are tribal societies that believe every word of these myths, or not every word, but pretty much effectively every word, right? So I would be very careful, and I do think there's something to your point, Scott. But I would be very careful and say, well, this society, at this specific time, this might be what's happening. But vast generalizations like that, I don't think will hold water in the long run.
Hold on. Just real quick. I think there's a vast generalization being made. Well, where you're saying that people believe these things in the past, like I think Dr. Bombay said it too. Is of course this is what people believed. We have zero evidence what people believed. What we have is like small amount of scribblings on papyrus, or like if we are lucky enough to get a stone. That gives us no greater insight into the human psyche or the way people thought within each of these societies.
Yeah, good point.
So if we look at Central America, and we talk about the Mayans, or we talk about the Aztecs, and their gods and goddesses that they believed in, and the fact that they committed sacrifices, I would say that they did believe in those gods and goddesses. We're not talking about why. I'm just talking about a civilization that did believe in those gods.
But Dr. Bombay, those people committing the sacrifices, the fucking Barack Obamas, the Hillary Trumps, it wasn't your average person working in a field picking rice.
But right? Those, no, you're missing the point. What would usually happen is there would be a belief system, and the powerful would see that belief system taking root within the people, and would then try and use it to control the people. It wasn't a case of always that the power, that the elite were always creating something. They would see something within the peasantry or the people, and they would say, let's take control of this belief that they have and try and control them. I mean, we can go to Christianity. We can go to Christianity, look at Jesus. The elites didn't like Jesus. It was the poor people. And then what happened? The elites created the Catholic Church. They took that thing, and now they're controlling the people around the world with this belief.
Exactly. And to that point, how do you know what the people who were elite believed before the elite got their hands on it in the first place? So if the elite recognizes, okay, we see this certain amount of people and this is what they're going for, and we see that there is a way that we can drive a wedge here and develop power for it, what we're gonna say is like, we can't let one fucking baby be fucking aborted. We can't fucking one child not get killed.
Doctor.
Just because the most extreme outcome, which is typically the information that gets passed down through time immemorial, is the most extreme. Like, it's like what gets passed down is not like fucking, oh man, Jeff was really fucking good to his daughter Jennifer his whole life. They had fucking grandkids and they lived this wonderful life, and there is nothing special that ever happened. Now that's 95% of the entire population of the world, right?
So if you're saying that, then if I look at what you're saying, where is your evidence that, say, for the ancient Greeks, the average person didn't give a damn about the gods and it was only the elites? Where's your evidence to confirm
Where's
that?
yours, Doctor?
Because you said, let me finish. You said that we don't really have that much information, but you've made a claim saying that for the ancient Greeks, that the ordinary person didn't believe in it. It was the elites. So I'm curious, where's the evidence for that claim?
Both of you guys, how do you know?
Hold on. Stop, Doctor. Ask a question to me, Doctor. I'm making a negative claim. I'm not making a claim that's saying this is the way it is. The claim that I'm making is we don't know if that's the way it is.
Doctor, explain yourself.
Totally different fucking.
Doctor, please explain yourself. Can you?
So if I tell you that,
Doctor, Nivik, ask your question, Doctor, answer, and then Kapow after that.
How do you know it didn't come from the elites? and it came from the people, and they took it over.
How do I know it didn't come from the elites? Did you say?
Yeah, you said it wasn't them that constructed it. It was people who thought that way, and they took it over. How do you know that?
I said it could have been either way. That's what I said. It could have been either way.
I think you're both saying the same thing then.
Yeah.
You both are looking at the.
Scott is claiming to not have enough evidence to make a claim, and you're saying it could be either way. So let's move on.
Scott did make the statement though that the general public didn't give a shit. But the problem is they're both looking at the same picture, hyper focusing on two sections and saying the other one is wrong. When you look at the broad spectrum in history, this level of religiosity comes and goes with the tides. It's not constant. Look at the switch between the religiosity of pantheism to Christianity in Rome.
Doctor didn't say either way at the beginning. He first said it came from the people and they took it over. But yeah, I can understand. I can understand either way. I can understand either way is logical.
What I actually said was, I actually was specific. I said, depending on the time period. I actually mentioned that as well. Mm-hmm. Depending on the time period, it would. How the people reacted to their belief in gods. Because if we fast forward to the 21st century, there's a brilliant documentary on Vice Channel. I think it's called The Greeks Who Still Believe in Zeus. And in there, it comes and shows you that up to today, that there are Greek people who take part in rituals venerating Poseidon and Zeus. Now, are they doing it exactly as their ancestors did? Or have they now, because we're in a new age, they're looking at it completely different from their ancestors. But in there, they're taking part in rituals, they're honoring Zeus, they're praying and singing to Poseidon. So they've chosen to believe that those things are real. They're not just metaphors.
Both sides of what you're saying is true, though.
What percentage of those people? And that's a thing. Like lexicon.
No, that's exactly it. That's what I wanted to get to. In Rome. In Rome, it was very, very common for Caesar or whoever is currently in power to go around and go, okay, I have this demographic through economics. I have this demographic through security. I'm going to appeal to the religious demographic, which is about 20 to 30% of the population in this region, by doing this ritual they expect me to do and then committing to the army. And when it doesn't work out, they just ignore that and move on anyways. They did it tons of times. So Bombay's right in that the elites use religion to guide the masses, but they can also use it to just manipulate the masses, or they can use it, fail, and then decide not to. People believe what they want to believe, and that changes all the time. There's large sections of history where religiosity drops to like next to nothing, and it's usually when theocracies take power and then fall. And once they fall, they're not enforcing that culture, and you get a rejection because it fell, people lose faith, and then you go through this phase where there's not much documentation because the religion is gone, and there's nobody doing the writing.
What confused me is that power more have influence. So the elite can manipulate the environment in a way in where it could be easier to have people believe things that are irrational, because if you're like saying that people can't read and they can't, you're intolerant to outside different views. You can isolate people in a way that they're ignorant and where they're less and more likely end up.
Absolutely,
please.
So when they have a gap, when you have a gap of knowledge,
just real quick. Nivek, you made a point that we can't skip over, because you said power has the ability to do this. So how are you regulating power? What do you mean as power? Is power a union? Is power a government? Is power like people coming together and saying, no, we're not going to do this anymore? There's so many forms of power. Like I find it hard when you use these broad terminologies like, well, this is what power wants. But then you have a specific notion of power that you're thinking of.
Yeah, the power of a leader that would have dictate what dictate government.
A power of a leader. Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a point to this. If supposedly, I mean, if the hypothesis is the powerful elites didn't believe it, but just basically put a spell on everybody to make them believe it. I mean, if you look at Egypt, which is again why I think it's very necessary to specify times and certain particular beliefs, because all beliefs are different, right? But if you look at Egypt, some of the beliefs about what to do with the body directly impacted the most highest ruling classes. I mean, what happened to the body, how they were buried, all these beliefs directly affected them. So for them to just use it as a ruse, and for then it to be used on their very burial seems kind of strange. Also, is the archetypal nature of these things. I mean, there's all these societies. They have all these different beliefs, but yet there's all these similar archetypes. The kind of jester, trickster archetype, the hero archetype, the vengeful, girlfriend archetype, etc. Right? And for all the powerful to have gotten together and communicated these ideas, I mean, that just, we didn't have the technology for that to happen, and it seems highly unlikely.
Zemo, in what you just said, you missed a very important thing about burials and death and the rituals around death. Aside from some very rare cases, such as Native Americans on the plains, the people in the Mayan region and Egypt, typically the method of burial and the rituals surrounding burial don't change in a region very much at all over history, regardless of religion in the place. That seems to be slotted in to whatever religion forms in the region.
I don't know, because in ancient Egypt, there was a time, depending on the dynasty we're talking about, where they did believe that going into the afterlife, they would take things with them. So certain royalty, when they died, they would have their servants, slaves, who would be killed and buried with them. So it seems a real elaborate hoax if you don't really believe that you're going to see some god or goddess in the next life with all your wealth and your slaves. You must actually believe that god exists, and you're taking your slaves there with you.
I wasn't talking about that aspect. I was saying that I was talking about death and the rituals surrounding it not coming from religion, but rather being a product of the region itself, and then it being shoehorned into and rules made about through religion after the fact. Like people in Scandinavia didn't bury their dead until like machinery came along, because the ground was so friggin' rocky, so you'd make cairns. Or you do the Viking burial. They would have above ground rituals, and then in regions where it's easy to dig, you have below ground rituals, so on and so forth. They're typically not a result of the religion; they're typically a result of the geography.
Was that actually true, that Viking burial where they put someone on a little boat, and then and then someone with a bow and arrow would light the arrow and then fire it? And
that was kings, not.
Is that actually true?
People were generally in the Vikings. They generally had their bodies burned.
So they were actually not a people group. It's actually a job. But specific people in the Viking field of work would become rich
in the modern era. We refer to Vikings as Nordic people from the the up to 1200 time frame.
I'm just trying to understand.
It's a job. It's like there was 1,000 jobs, but like when someone says Viking, they don't mean a job.
I know. I'm saying though, to the people who were getting having the at sea burials with a burning ship, were typically only Vikings who got rich enough they would be considered, like a couple hundred years later they would have been kings. Like you got really rich doing it.
So just to confirm, we're saying that whether it was the Danish, the Swedish, or the Norwegians, when these rich people would die, so there were actual rivers or lakes or fjords, whatever they called them, that would have burning boats just hanging around there. No one cleared it up.
Yeah, but it was rare. It wasn't like typical people getting that.
All right, I see. Okay. Just one question for everyone in regards, going back to the ancient Greeks with the Iliad that was mentioned. In that story, the king of the Greeks, Agamemnon, sacrifices his daughter to the gods, and he was the king. So I'm guessing he must have believed that the gods really did exist, or was he doing an elaborate hoax to just kill his daughter?
To be fair, people didn't view life as that important back then. I could absolutely see a king killing his daughter in a ritual for, the plea of the people to have the battle go well or some shit, for sure. People sacrificing kids wasn't that all that rare.
It could just be a story. Right?
Yeah, that too. Could also just be a lie.
The whole thing could just be fiction.
Well, certainly that.
I thought archaeologists found evidence that the Trojan War did take place around in Turkey.
They found evidence that a war took place, but that doesn't mean that a king sacrificed his daughter in ritual sacrifice and actually did that, as opposed to just tell everyone that we sacrificed our daughter so that they'll fight harder.
I mean, that's kind of like digging up the Daily Bugle and saying Spider-Man existed.
It's like digging up the Onion and saying that Kim Jong-un really likes donuts 20,000 years from now.
Where do we gauge the skepticism to what level? Because if we take it to that level, can anything from the past be believed to have been true?
Yes, it can. But not to a degree of certainty where you'd call it a scientific fact. When you have corroborating sources where to do this corroboration, great effort would have had to been undertaken between people groups, typically those things are not found to be false by corroborating evidence further down the line, or archaeological evidence. If something's been written about in different regions multiple times, this is something that was so important, everyone had to know across a vast area. So this was written down and traded. And you couldn't lie about something like that back then because it would cause problems in, say, the economy or a war principle, and then other people would have backlash if you had done that.
Yeah, but like think about Agamemnon. His story was told as part of the Iliad, right? So that is a story that there's something real happened, probably, and then 1,000 years went by with people singing about it because it's a great story, and obviously some of it was embellished and some of it was downplayed, and they forgot the parts that weren't really very interesting, and probably some people made up some shit in between, and 1,000 years later somebody wrote it down and they were like, well, here's the story that I heard from this blind poet.
Another great example of that, actually, just go back to the Vikings, the sagas. Like, I'm certain every single battle mentioned in the sagas probably happened at some point. But the crazy shit of, like, cutting through a mast with an axe, yeah, no, that didn't happen.
Not in one swing, maybe in 10 swings if you had to chop
maybe like
mast.
50 swings. War axes for cutting people are very bad at cutting wood. So, good luck. Like,
and they're not very heavy.
I understand what you mean. Like, the things within the Iliad, one would easily challenge, like, the gods and goddesses getting involved in picking sides, who should win, or the Amazons suddenly turning up and
the one-eyed Cyclops that
and all that stuff.
That roll a rock in front of the cage.
But by the same token,
there are obvious things that we can easily challenge. But then I'm just saying there might be little gray areas where it's a little difficult to say whether it's reality or fantasy. Certain things I find.
For sure, I'm just saying the stunt of cutting an axe, taking an axe and cutting a mast in half, is kind of on the same scale as crazy as sacrificing your daughter for securing the will of the gods for your coming battle. Like,
I don't know though. Would it be going back 1,000 years? Because as you mentioned earlier, like sacrificing a child back then would have been no big deal.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in the story, like in the context of the story, that's kind of a crazy move. You don't typically do human sacrifice in that age. It was typically people sacrifice. The child sacrifice thing was in essence to the god, not for a battle. Like, that's kind of crazy.
This is where mythology can be symbolic or representational of more something like a more abstract concept. It's not necessarily literal. It's like these, almost unhuman feats. That's something to consider.
Yeah, so basically, basically what I'm thinking is that, let's just say there's a story of Agamemnon sacrificing his daughter to the gods to win the battle, right? I heard that story is evidence that the fact that I heard that story is evidence that somebody who was artistic that was passing along that story thought that it was inspiring to the people that he was playing to. It's not evidence that Agamemnon actually sacrificed his daughter, and actually believed in gods.
There you go.
So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Agamemnon existed, and 2 also believed in or was superstitious about some kind of supernatural beings controlling our destiny. I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, but I don't think that the fact that someone told a story about it, that's like there's a couple of things that have to go right in a row for that to be true. So I can say maybe it's true. It wouldn't surprise me if I had a time machine and I went back and I found that it really was true that someone sacrificed their daughter to win a war.
Well, I mean, I think it probably would work in any time period, most time periods, like it did, like it would nowadays. I mean, you take any person, right? Say, do you believe in Sasquatch? No, I don't believe in Sasquatch. Do you believe in ghosts? No, I don't believe in ghosts. Do you believe in the Tooth Fairy? No. Eventually, you will come to one that they do believe in. And then if you do this for everybody, and obviously there's going to be people that believe in more, there's going to be people that believe in less, some people are going to be all in, some people won't believe in anything. But generally speaking, you will find someone that believes in almost every myth if you search long enough, right?
About Kanye West,
can I say one thing real quick? If your family is prospering by the viewpoint of being anointed by God, wouldn't it make sense if you sacrifice a family member for the betterment of the group?
It would, yeah. Even if you didn't believe in God, it might still make sense to sacrifice your third daughter or something.
Yeah, because your family is a gift from God, and that the importance of that belief is more that the importance of that belief, sacrificing
exactly.
your daughter for the benefit of the family. That is God. That is.
Well, think about this. Think about this, Nivik. If you're a king and you know there's no God, or you don't believe in God, but you know that the people that you're ruling over do believe in God, and the basis of your power is the fact that they think that God has anointed you, then wouldn't you pretend like you believe in God just to maintain your power? Absolutely you would. Right? So Agamemnon, even though he might not have believed in Zeus, absolutely could have sacrificed one of his 200 children. He probably had that many if he was a king back then. Absolutely could have sacrificed one of his 200 children to keep other people in line, to keep them believing in him, to make them think that he would do whatever it takes to make the gods happy, and that's why he's the leader.
And it's for the betterment of the rest of your family, and where the belief in God is for the betterment of your family, because your family would be a gift from God.
I don't think that's typically the thought process of the people in that era, Nivik. I think that's more of a later development under monotheism.
So what's a later development, Lexicon?
The concept that humanity itself came from the gods, in that sense, like God gifts you your child or whatever. Typically, the gods were seen as forces of power in the universe, and people came from the earth. There was a separation there.
But look, how you in a lot of the older way which benefits you. How you believe in things, the person of power, they want it to be, they want things to be believed in a way in how it benefits them.
Yeah, but the thing is like Zeus, the big daddy of the gods, he wasn't responsible for fertility. You know what I'm saying? Like, you might go to the fertility god specifically for, I would like some help with fertility. But you don't go to Zeus and be like, you granted me my thing. So you sacrifice your kid to the war god. The war god didn't help you get pregnant. It's just not. There's no connection.
Yeah. If you want help navigating,
power dictates outcome, and the people that are in power would dictate the belief. Would more be able to dictate the belief of what to believe and what not to believe, and that viewpoint would be dictated in a way in which it would conveniently benefit them.
Yeah, I can see that argument to be made. Yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with what I just said, though.
So right now we're talking about how myths can be used in systems of power or something, or
Yeah. Well, I was gonna.
That's what people have been drifting towards.
That's what Nivik, I think, wants to go towards. But let me ask this open-ended question.
I'm saying like power more dictates outcome of things.
Nivik, let him ask the open-ended question.
That was actually a useful distinction Nivik just made.
What did he say?
He was saying he wasn't necessarily saying that like the gods have power. He was saying the power is it's located in the people itself, and the people at the top get to dictate how that power flows toward what gods.
I'm saying
I understood.
Yeah.
No, I said the person that's in a position of power would more dictate the outcome of how things come to be, and they dictate how the belief of God would be, and their dictation of how the belief in God would be in a convenient way that benefits them.
Typically, I think you're right, but I think all the occasions that we have historically...
I don't think I'm right. I know I am.
Well, here's the thing, is I think all of the cases we have in history that are written down that prove out your point are a result of the... Wait, no, that's wrong. Sorry. All the cases we have in history of where this doesn't occur, and they show up constantly, is when the leaders are forced to change the religion. Happened in Rome, happened in Greece, happened all kinds of crazy places. And it was either typically through invasion of another power, or it was the public would have a rapid change in what religion they were following, and the leaders had to follow along. Catholicism even went through it when they invaded the Gauls in the north, and the pagans. They had to adapt their religion to that region, otherwise they would have had constant conflict forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wanted to ask this. We've been talking about gods, and normally nowadays it's more of a monotheistic god. But I just wanted to ask, what is the concept of a god? What does that even mean, especially in mythology?
I got nothing. That's way too broad of a term.
Okay. How is God being used in this conversation?
I was going to say that in answer to your question, the definition of God would depend on the civilization and the century. So some people might see it as a deity that is controlling their lives and has the power to control their lives if they go to it for help. But then another century in a different civilization, they might see it differently.
It's literally embodied. It's like has a body and a face and arms and walks around.
Well, this goes back. Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying about depending on the civilization. So if we go back to our favorites, the ancient Greeks, depending on what century, I mean, Zeus used to come down in the form of a human being to seduce women, didn't he, and impregnate them. So he had the power to make himself look like a regular human being. Or he would come down as a swan and he would seduce a woman, and then Perseus would be born, or Hercules or Achilles. So it depends on the civilization. Some gods had the ability to look like us, but they were gods. They couldn't be killed or hurt. And so it depends on which civilization we're talking about and which century.
Well, it seems to me in a lot of mythology I've looked at that the gods are essentially just people like us, but they're just more powerful. They have attributes. They can live forever, but they're basically like us. And there's also the stories of the giant people, the great giants. That's kind of in South America and stuff.
Titans in ancient Greece.
Yeah,
Titans. Yeah,
precisely. They were the uncles and the aunts of the Olympians, and they fought a war. So some of them would have been killed. So it seems, depending on the civilization, some gods were able to kill other gods to take power or imprison them.
Yeah, and in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of stuff like that too, with gods fighting each other and war and shit.
But yeah, so generally speaking, though, like in mythology, it seems like a god impersonates a part of nature, right? Or a human emotion, like Cupid does love, or an action that's undertaken by humans, like war, the god of war.
They're anthropomorphizing concepts.
Right. So what do you think that human tendency is to anthropomorphize concepts like this?
I think it's strength against the pitiless. Pitiless.
You're roboting. You're roboting. I think the gods are against you. They don't want you to talk. You're roboting.
Yeah. I guess.
I think that,
Hallelujah.
It's some sort of mechanism to acquire control over the pitiless indifference of the universe. So I can't get pregnant. You know, what the hell? The universe doesn't care. You've gone. You get a Cupid. If your crops are dehydrated and they're going to fail, you know, you bury a child in a hole. You do something that gives you a one-up on the pitiless indifference of the universe. That's what God is.
Did you get all of that?
It was roboting for me the whole time. I don't know if it was for other people.
I think that.
I think the little I did understand is that basically you were saying we can go to some of these gods for the things we want. But yeah, I couldn't hear most of that, honestly. I'm sorry. Try to disconnect and come back or something.
Hello?
Yes.
Welcome back.
Okay. I was trying to say that a broad definition of God would be to gain control over the pitiless indifference of the universe. So if you have trouble getting pregnant, there's Cupid. If you have, you know, existential dread, there's heaven. If you want to destroy your enemy in war, you know, it's a motivating force to gain control. That goes from the peasant to the leadership. And I think Pascal's wager might be a little older than we think in regards to some of the leadership, because I think leadership can waver in their beliefs, but if it's a comforting thing to tell yourself that this may be true, and it's very beneficial to me to believe it because I'm getting tithes, you know, like money. But in summary, I think God, broadly speaking, is something that has some sort of control against the pitiless indifference of the universe. It just makes sense that way. Whatever.
That's an interesting way to look at it, yeah. I mean, if you think about it that way, it's the exact opposite of humans, right? I mean, we essentially feel like we have no control.
Yeah, and even when we give our best efforts, you know,
we can only control so much, right?
On their face. And, right. So you have the Olympian, he goes out there in the Olympic Games or whatever, breaks a leg, and that athlete knows that that's a real possibility. But if he can get a little extra help, if he can pray to a god, I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds like a warm blanket.
So it's a functional belief. It serves a purpose, right?
Earlier you asked about how gods work within mythology, and like the characters within mythology are creating a narrative or a story that can help encapsulate some sort of lesson or like make clear some sort of abstract concept or something like that. Isn't Isn't that the case? It's not necessarily telling you instructions about ritual or practice necessarily. The mythology doesn't necessarily talk about that always.
Not necessarily. There could be a ritual built around something, but it not be discussed in the myth itself. Yeah, I think that's probably correct. Yeah.
Like earlier, you were someone mentioned something about Santa Claus, and it made me think about like are those do those exist in mythology? I don't think like there are some folk stories about Santa Claus, but it's not like a deep, rich mythology necessarily. It just seems more like a folk tradition. So
that kind of
folklore is a subsect of mythology.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to ask the question: what's the difference between folklore and mythology?
One is a subcategory of another. One is a subcategory of another. They're not different.
Okay, so folklore would be a subcategory of mythology. Would you say religion is a subcategory of mythology as well?
No, I'd say religion is a
really.
Religion is placed on top of mythology. It's it's an organization of myths brought together to serve a separate function. It goes beyond just having a belief.
You think it's separate from mythology,
or just having because mythology are stories.
Because you the best context I have is the Christian one, only because that's my background. But I would say there is a difference between believing the Bible and having a personal relationship with God and going to church. You can hate the concept of the church and still have complete faith in the Bible. One's a myth. One's the structure that's on top of the myth that gives you support and rules and community.
See, to me, it would seem like religion is just a subset of a myth, right? Of mythology, right?
Mythology is the stories themselves, though.
Yeah, exactly. Mythology is the story themselves. Religion is
real quick.
An organization of people telling you how to act based on those myths.
Let me say something real quick. Like, so with the Black Plague death, you had people who were burnt as witches, who were blamed for the death that was being brought down on them by the wrath of God, because and it was concluded that God was punishing them because they're tolerating undesirables in society. And
wait, what?
People who just be looked down upon, usually people who are vulnerable in society, they're just being scapegoated for the Black Plague death, and they were burnt. They were blamed and burnt as witches. So the connection of the mythology of a witch and believing in God.
Well,
they're not separate.
So the myth here.
The idea is that we have witches are like a very tricky archetype to begin with, because the modern witch that we have now is not how people saw witches in the past.
Yeah,
not even.
The witches, the witches are the myth, and then the religion is the on top rules, regulations, how we're going to deal with it. The myth is the powers and the things the witches can do. The religion is what we're going to do about the witches. They're two separate things.
That works. That's a working definition.
Okay, so they kind of relate but don't relate to each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. One's built upon the other. It's like if you want to look at it, myth is the data points that people falsely believe about reality, and religion is the instructions by the community on how we should react to that.
So the type of so how people are thinking in them coming to the belief of God is separate from them coming to the belief of witches.
But it seems to me that with this operation of the definition, and the reason I think religion, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but even like the church itself, like we're going to have a church, we're going to build a church, we're going to go to the church, and what are we going to do in the church? We're going to sing hymns. Everything you're doing operationally is based on a myth, right? So even if there's the belief, the stories, and then the larger surface on top of it or the top of it.
He's saying that they're separate, but they're
right.
He's saying that they're separate, but I was just saying how they related to each other.
I can see how that one could be a little bit different because the mythology that they're using does have some instructional material within it, but not all. But just Christian myths maybe do that, but not all myths do that.
Most don't.
Like sometimes, yeah, I would agree. Most don't have any type of.
I really think that's centrally around Abrahamic religions. I think that might actually be the only subsect that does that. Aside, I can't think of any other. Like Shinto, Hinduism, none of them say like go out and preach this. Some of them even like Judaism even reverses it and say don't teach this to anyone. This is for you only.
Is a demon a myth? Is a demon a myth, or is it religious?
Nordic religions definitely have done that in the past.
Yeah, that's true.
Is a demon a myth, lexicon, or is it a religion?
Just like the witch. The demon.
I'm saying if you substitute a person as a demon and you kill them as a demon, but the demon is demon.
Okay, so Nivik, the concept of the demon, once again, myth. The religion, burn them at the stake to purify the soul, religion.
Okay, but the demon is...
now, if the religion goes out of its way to say the only way you can purify the demon is by burning it at the stake, at that point, then yeah, sure, the religion is invoking myth, and those lines have become blurred for sure.
No, but a demon is religious. It's an angel that descended from heaven to hell.
Yeah, but it's also mythological. I think the point that's trying to be made here is the differentiation between like a myth is an idea and where religious is action.
In a sense, yeah.
Right, but even the burning of the stake example, maybe I'm dense, maybe I don't get it, but even the burning itself, the stake itself, like, are they not part of the myth? That the idea that that the witch needs to be killed this way is part of the story. Like the story is witches will die this way or whatever. Like
perfect. I know exactly how to describe, but I know how to make a delineation here and make the difference. So modern age, it's still the proper way to deal with a witch or a demon is burn them at the stake. You don't see that in religion. It's gone. We don't burn people at the stake anymore. I mean, some people in Africa do it, but they're weird. So it's really a rare thing now because the religion has moved on.
Maybe
the actions of the community have changed from following that particular strain of the myth.
Maybe the way how we treat people is just a different way, but it's not in the same way. In where you could see people who look at another person as evil, and they might not burn them, but they could try to ostracize them. They could, say you could demonize people in a way that is othering them and scapegoating them. I mean, the burning of the stake, it wouldn't fly, but we still do it, but in a different ways. Where I'm coming from.
Well, maybe we'd have less witches today if we did burn them at the stake. Witch problem is a big deal, and it's a thing. So maybe we'd have less one. I'm sorry.
So I'm saying, like, let's say, like after the Civil War, if some folks not being for segregation, they'd be in trying to be like trying to interact with blacks and thinking that's okay, they'd be ostracized from society,
yeah. So like I'd like to refine what I'm saying. I would call religion the organization of people in society based around current commonly believed myths.
Why would a witch be ostracized? Because they're not going along with societal norms, right? And people
typically
people who don't see people who go along with societal norms, the same thing could happen to them in today's world that we're living in. A witch has
literally never been burnt to the stake before, right? There were always people who accused as being witches. There's never been a single case of confirmed witch. Everybody always gets the purified soul and goes to heaven at the end.
No, I was just talking about how people can be treated as if they're witches and be ostracized.
Yeah.
You mean like those damn leper on
they never really killed people as witches?
No. They killed people as witches, but witches never existed. There was never
saying,
any power.
Yeah. He's saying they believed it, but it wasn't true. It was an untrue belief.
In the same way that those dirty capitalists over there, I heard them saying something bad about Stalin. Hang them down.
No. We were saying that we don't do the witchcraft today, and I say, well, we do. It's just different. So.
I think pretty much everybody would agree with
we don't believe in. He said that we don't burn people as witches today, but we do it in a different way. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. He's basically making the point that human societies ostracize people, and that's a common theme throughout history in different ways. Which burning them at the stake is a severe example, but I think we probably would all agree to that all human societies have some mechanism to ostracize a certain person or delineate them as the bad one or scapegoat them.
Yeah, because they're not conforming.
Not even.
The very term scapegoating comes from a tradition where they would take a goat, literally like hurl. Everybody would come. I don't know. Maybe someone knows how this goes. Probably better than me. But they would throw all their curses and on the goat as it walked out of the town, and they would literally believe it. Took away all the bad omens or whatever.
I think it was in the Old Testament. They would just send a goat into the desert.
That's what it is.
But I think that tradition actually existed before Judaism in the region. It was just codified in that way by the Jews.
With goats specifically, or what is it with goats?
I'm pretty sure the whole killing goats and putting like your sins and your curses and your problems with life on the goat and then sending it away I think it's really old. And the reason I think it's goats is because they were the first domesticated animal, to my knowledge.
A little bit of trivia for all of you. I saw in a documentary a while ago that in ancient Greece there used to be a vase or some vase called an ostragon. And in a town, if they decided they wanted to get rid of someone, people would cast their votes, their pebbles, the white pebbles, the black pebbles, into the ostragon. It would then be emptied and they would count the pebbles and they would decide whether that person would be ostracized from the town. But it came from that thing called ostragon.
To be clear, people were the first things that we subjected.
Dude, well, that's actually a pretty mellow form of it, right? So if you look at Inuits, you just got to a certain age, and like, guess what? See that ice float over there? Go ahead and get on it.
What?
Inuits, like
Inuits, they put their old people on an ice float.
Yeah, so this is the way they had ostracized people in Inuit society. If you got to a point where like you couldn't produce anymore, they'd put you on an ice float and just shoot you out to fucking the ocean.
How common practice was that, really? And I'd say the first animals that we domesticated were human.
Yeah, so I just looked it up on Google. According to Google, it is actually goats, with dogs and sheep only being a couple thousand years after.
Yeah, the first domesticated animal?
Yeah, it's goat. That's probably why it's a goat in term.
I was going to say you're human slave.
Yeah, actually, slavery is definitely after domestication as a concept. Slavery was a step up from slaughtering them all. That's what people were doing beforehand.
It was a way of.
What if you work them to death?
It's indentured.
I mean, yeah, that's just shittier slavery, Nivik. That's not.
Yeah, it's a way of helping. There's slavery, which is like, you're gonna like do a basic job or really not do anything, and we don't really care. But indentured slavery is there's an unequal system, but it works with the slave.
Well, when does it say that started?
Indentured slavery? Well, I'm just curious because the agricultural era of over 10,000 years ago, we still show signs of basically slavery. People that it's almost like a class in a way, but people that are being used for work, they get paid, right? And they don't get paid, but they get paid in food and they get places to live. So it's that community vibe, but there's this class structure here where there's no equal power. So you could see that as this people, and it was a joke. Obviously, we don't domesticate humans; we domesticate other animals. But yeah, slavery is something interesting of how long ago. Like you wouldn't say the Mayans were slaves, right? But yet that's kind of the same relationship in a lot of ways that they had.
Well, here's the point that I'm going down. Like when I ask how long it goes back, is you can look at largest empire of the world, Genghis Khan. Necessarily have to take slaves. People once they were just like, okay, yeah, this is the group that we're part of now.
Well, I mean, like I said, look at something like the Mayans, right? So something like the Mayans, I think they're like 6,000-7,000 years ago. If you had that, it's like most of those people were technically slave labor. Like there was no like democracy there. It was, you had rulers that owned the people and would sacrifice the people. So it is this weird structure, right, where it's not true slavery in modern context, but owning people, using them for labor has been a common practice until recently in human history, which is good. It's just sad it's taken so long.
Yeah, so Sumeria is the first civilization we have evidence of where slavery as a concept was common and prevalent.
Yeah, that's why I was confused when he mentioned the Mayans and he said 6,000, because I thought it was Mesopotamia, Sumeria, like lexicon.
I didn't want to. Once again, it's different. So I didn't like. You can go back as far even as the Egyptians, which were older than the Mayans. You know, like 10, 12,000, right?
The Mayans were only about 5, 6.
That's what I said. Yeah. 6,000.
Point is, goes 12 to 13,000 years ago.
Mayans were like 500-600 years ago. It really wasn't that long. Like when conquistadors landed, there were still Mayans.
Yeah, but not the extinction or the initial creation of the Mayans, settling of the Mayans.
Yeah, I think Mayans actually did have slavery for quite a while.
Oh yeah,
I think the Mayans had it. I didn't know the Sumerians had it. I thought they had a different form.
The Sumerians had it as well in that region of Mesopotamia. Maybe even apart from them, you had the Akkadians as well. And the
the Akkadian texts don't talk about slavery in that context, apparently.
What they talk about it in a different context, or they don't talk about it at all.
We're talking about like slavery in the concept of going somewhere, capturing people, and making them slaves. That basically wasn't a thing until Sumeria.
Okay, I see. All right, cool. It's just the Sumerians. So what, the Babylonians didn't do it? That's interesting.
Let's just be honest here. Like it only goes back that far because we only have papers that go back far. Who knows how far back?
No. We have paper that goes further back than that. Yeah, that's what we're saying. That's when it first started showing up on paper.
But just because we have paper that goes that far back, how many Right Said Fred CDs are still in workable condition?
Okay, no, for sure. I'm not going to argue against an unknown. Yeah, sure, it's possible it existed for sure, and nobody ordained to write it down.
In the millions of years, there could be a non-human species that had a civilization. All of that is lost to deep time. There wouldn't even be any archaeological evidence.
Well, I mean, I think the human capacity to go to war and then, and it's like you were saying, instead of capturing them, just instead of killing them, the people rather capture them and then work them as a better system for them, instead of them having to die. I mean, it just seems pretty like a natural progression of humans interacting with each other, right?
Doesn't it seem like if you look at like Norwegian places though, like they would go and take slaves, but over a period of time, slaves would just become part of the society. I think this is something that is far more common than people being set to being slaves for the rest of their life. Right?
It's a condition of the times. It's a condition of the mentality overall. ZMO, get my feedback. Sorry, but it's like a condition of the whole mentality of the agricultural era, which is demanding to take care of a village. which is putting these pressures on the village, and you're starting to know that these weird back alley contracts are starting to happen, and one of them is to this utmost extreme of owning a human, and whether that might be a good idea in the beginning because this human needs a place to sleep and they need a place to eat and they want to become a farmhand and so on and so on and so on. You've got rules and regs. It's kind of like the beginnings of a business. We now live in an era where that thought just doesn't even occur, and it just seems so weird to even place that. So we've created a system and an area, and we created a landscape to where you go insert the concept of slavery or owning a person, regardless of whatever need. It's just not going to work out great as compared to the systems back there. So I think they just developed a shitty system. Like, they could have done it without slavery, not a problem.
Yeah, the whole people being slaves for life thing, that comes and goes throughout history all over the place.
Yep. Exactly.
So let's get into. I want to talk about mythology and its relationship to death. So it seems like mythology provides a lot of solace to people. The beliefs can serve as to help them cope with death, the uncertainty of it all, the final judgment of your soul, so to speak. And even in myth, there's this idea of the curse of immortality. Like, immortality is seen as a curse often in mythology. So, what are your thoughts on death and mythology and the connection there?
I think that it is very horrible to the human psyche to put a big question mark at the end of death. To say, I don't know. Nobody knows. That person's gone and it's not alive anymore, which we really don't know what that is. And to this day, it is still horribly one of those things that is on the human psyche. And so instead of actually dealing with that fact, people start suppositing possibilities, not really probabilities, but just possibilities, using different types of logic called special pleading. Like, I don't use the same system to come up how there's a God with how I come up with the same system to make sure that there's enough gas in my car to get home. You actually use a better system to make sure there's enough gas in your car to come home than use the system of faith. And so the special pleading is involved in all this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fragile mind and the ego needing to know or wanting to know something is on the other end, rather than dealing with it in a different way, like, well, you have no idea, so you better make today count.
I think it's very... Oh, sorry.
Sorry. And let me finish this. With a Broken Bells line. Only when we're faced with our mortality do we see the gods and all their desires appear.
I think it's very interesting what happens to a culture in a mythos, in a society when they go through something that's horrible, and it's not something that's caused by a known force that they can understand. It's a sudden plague with like, you get used to your environment over time. Let's say the Native Americans, things like Wendigos, Tahates, they exist until shortly after white people showed up and disease started spreading. They came up with these horrid monsters right at the end of their civilization. Shit was going crazy. And it's amazing how you go from this balanced perspective of, all these animals have their order and their lineup set up, and they all do their own thing, and these are the lessons you can learn from them, to there's monsters lurking in the woods. All this changed rapidly in about a 100-year period.
What do you think causes that?
I think it's just sudden, rapid upheaval. Same thing happened with Pompeii. Immediately after Pompeii disappeared, Hades and a whole bunch of the other negative viewed gods suddenly got more temples and everything in Rome immediately after that happened, and there was a huge wave of people taking up interest in the death gods.
It's that the same thing. Like, if there's like a drought one year, people back, that's because.
Yeah, that's interesting to know, is the amount of population that increases, which then increases the amount of disease, which then increases the amount of mysticism.
I kind of wish Dan Dan was here, because or maybe it isn't Dan Dan, but there's somebody on this Discord that's always going on about how when you throw pigeons in a box, and you make them push a button at random, they all come up with these crazy superstitions. If you throw a bunch of pigeons in a box,
that's me. It's called
Doolittle. Yeah,
called the Skinner box.
Yeah, so the Skinner box. Throw a whole bunch of pigeons in a box. They all come up with superstitions, and then when one pigeon gets slightly more food than the others, they all switch to that superstition immediately. And then you have a bunch of pigeons all doing the same exact crazy nonsense. So it's kind of funny that by that same metric, I think people probably do the same thing. You get these collections of people with beliefs, and then those beliefs become self-reinforcing until they cause their own problems, reinforcing other beliefs. It's probably why we see pantheism over and over and over again, because you don't want to attribute death to your fertility god or your, bringing the sun giving light god.
That's like the problem. Yeah, that's like the problem of evil in Christianity. They always run into that. That's why it has the name, right?
Yeah.
No matter how justified belief, it's always like, well, if God's all good, why would he kill all these, children with cancer? So
and that's for most of us actually, kind of look at that stuff. I'm getting a lot of feedback still. So it's where a lot of us kind of get a little bit upset, is because we do see a lot of beliefs, ideas. You just say ideas is fine. A lot of ideas about what is going on, what's the natural world, what happens when you die, so on and so on. What is this connection that I have with other people? And we call it emotions. And what is that? And consciousness. The issue, though, is that all of that is great. It's great to talk about those things. It does connect us in a lot of ways. It's good positive mental speech sometimes as well. Like, I follow the path of Christ on some of the things he says. Like, absolutely. Do I believe that he's the son of God and all that shit? Fuck no. Right? He could have just been a man, could not been a man, but let's listen to the words. My point is that only in the certain amount of minor instances it starts to get wheeled incorrectly. Pious people make assumptions about their religion and actually start taking action in the wrong direction. Religious decrees start coming forth in different ways and starts gaining more followers. This kind of stuff, we attack the whole understanding of mythicism when it's just a group of people that are using mythicism, and they would probably just use anything else. And there's been a common practice for using mythicism and, saving people from hell, so it's worth yelling at them about it, or going door to door and interrupting people. Like, these are techniques that are kind of like, I don't know how to say it, about like 1% about the whole, actual religion and what it means to people. That's like just a few people. So I want to kind of say the overall mysticism and understanding gods, that helped so many people through their life. So many people in a time of uncertainty and doubt, where they don't have the scientific method, they don't have philosophy, they're not born in an age of internet. Please, including my puppy. Yeah, so it's good. It's good to have some of that stuff, as long as it's managed and regulated well, and it all got us here, didn't it?
Yeah, that's well put, Grim.
Yes, some of us anyway.
So let me, I want to say what I think about like how this stuff is all useful, right? From a chemical engineering perspective, one of the things we study is how to optimize solutions to problems. And when you have a really big problem with a lot of complex variables, you can't just do what we call enumerating the whole problem set, which is where the whole problem space, which is where you just, you write down all the different possible solutions and pick the best one, right? You can't do just something called hill climbing, which is where, okay, you want to get to the top of the hill. I guess you guys all should understand hill climbing. You want to get to the top of a hill. You orient yourself up the hill and just start walking. And when there's no more uphill left, then you're at the top of the hill, right? And, people with intelligence have gotten to the point where they've learned to climb to the top of a hill and then look around to see something in the far distance where maybe there's something higher. It's not just their feet. Maybe you have to go downhill to get uphill. But in the problem space of morality and how to live your life and how to live throughout generations and how to organize a society, this is something that you can't just test with science and pick what the best randomly controlled, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial tells you what to do, because you only get one shot. You only get one shot at it in any given person's lifetime, and the study group is bigger than the population. Okay, if you have a 6-sided dice and you want to tell whether it's fair, how many times do you have to roll it? You have to roll it something like 60 times, and then you can use statistical analysis and tell whether it's fair. Well, how about when you have a problem space that's got a million different possible parameters that you want to optimize around, and there's only 24 million people in the world? Well, your study group is bigger than the whole population of the world, so you got to pick something and go with it. And the only way you optimize that is with something called a genetic algorithm, which is where essentially there are certain traditions that you keep, and there are certain traditions which some people will decide to throw away, and some people would decide to keep certain traditions. You keep certain stories, and you live your life around it. And over the course of generations, you can optimize across a very big and complex problem space, even though nobody knows why they're doing what they are. They just realize you have to realize that, let's just say you keep 90% of the traditions of your parents, and you try to figure out which ones are doing us harm and which ones are doing us good. You keep 90% of them, and you throw out the 10% that are doing us the most harm. Or maybe you do something random, and you say, well, maybe it does more good if we do this one thing different. And then you teach your kids that, and you don't really know if all of society is going to be better if we change all of society for that. But once you pass on that tradition, the societies that survive better are going to survive better.
Yeah, and they're going to have these methods that, I mean, you're talking about illiterate, uneducated people that most of the religion has helped, because they don't understand. They just know shellfish is bad, but nobody wants to tell them the amount of germs that are in shellfish that could cause like death. Right? So you just go,
people didn't even have the germ theory of disease. They didn't even have the germ theory of disease. Yeah, exactly. They just we just know shellfish are bad. We have a tradition of not eating shellfish, and it turns out we survive a little better. And that's the way you explore a complex problem space that's so big that you can't test all the different locations.
I wanted to share something as well, just to kind of reflect off that, to kind of put what you said in context, which is I like to play video games. Now, when you're playing a video game, right, which everybody I'm sure likes to play, there's a lot of people that like to play them, everyone has their favorite, you almost have so many factors that your brain can't factor everything, so then it becomes exciting. And some people call that hope, some people call that faith that you're going to win. You could even say it's just confidence. It might go into confidence, like, I took an analytic research and I saw all these factors in the game I'm playing that I most likely will win right now, and if I fail, I'll try again. So they're even factoring the consequences of losing. This is the feeling and the vibe where you really can't you could put science, you could put analytics on there. There's genuine numbers there, whether you're going to succeed or not. But at the end of the day, there's so many factors that only really the universe would know, that's what makes it fun. So we actually enjoy these feelings of uncertainty, and we actually enjoy these feelings of confidence and faith and hope, because in the right positions, not like when you're trying to kill somebody or go to war, they're really fun. They are really fun.
So, if I understood what you're saying, Doolittle and Grim, but you're basically saying this is an operational heuristic for humanity to work on, and since there's so many people, you need people doing this over here, people doing that over there, to try to figure everything out.
Yeah, what's the best technology to pass down information to the next generation about how to live your life, so that everyone can be better off? Do you
the Bible?
And I think a lot some mythology is written, some is oral. It depends on what mythology and what part of the world, right? But so you pass it down in that manner.
Right, but also, but people write a lot of books, right?
Right, and
a lot of those books don't get passed down.
Right. So how do you determine which one is, and is it going to be part of it? Yeah.
Well, the thing is that
wait,
that
I got
people,
the perfect joke.
Oh,
Don't
sorry,
take
go
it
for
too literally.
Okay. Go for it.
I was gonna say, don't take it too literally.
Oh, that was the joke. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so a lot of people write books and they write plays and they write music and they act these things out. And the ones that are true, the ones that help people feel better and survive better and live better lives, get passed down to children and children upon children, and the ones that don't vanish into obscurity in a short period of time.
Although that is a deterministic argument.
What?
Because the story has been passed down, it must be the best story. That's kind of a determinist argument because it's there.
What the hell are you talking about? No, the one, no. What the hell are you talking about? Determinism.
Yeah, how did determinism get into it?
I think it's genetic fallacy, which is, if it exists, therefore it's the
No, that's a naturalistic fallacy. Is that if it exists, it's good. But
genetic naturalistic, I think.
So there's somebody's got like some rap playing in the background or something. If you turn it down. I don't know. It's like all I can hear is the bass like shaking something.
Yeah, I told him to turn down the
there's
but I don't think it worked.
Yeah, so there's a there's a naturalistic fallacy, which means that if it is then it's good, right? And so if you followed the if you followed the Stoics, they figured out a long time ago that something that is, it just is, right? It's not good. Just because something is, it doesn't mean it's good or bad. Like a lion eating a gazelle isn't bad. It just is, right? Like lions eat gazelle. That's just what they do. It's not good or bad. There's nothing good or bad about what something has to do to survive. And so, if something is, it is because it survived. And you can make a judgment that something that is better in terms of survival than something that didn't survive. But that doesn't mean it's the best that it doesn't mean just because something is, it means it's a solution. It doesn't mean it's the best solution. But a lot of times people use the naturalistic fallacy or claims of calling something a naturalistic fallacy to discredit something that's good enough. And really anything that has evolved to become something that people follow in general as a matter of tradition, that's good enough to survive, right? Like that, is it good? Is it the best? Can we do better? Maybe it's good. There's not a lot of stuff that survived that's bad for if your goal is to live, if you think more life is good, your goal is to live, and something is and it survived, there's very low chance that's a bad thing.
I actually do agree with your position. I was just trying to play devil's advocate, see what you would say. I do agree with you. I take your point.
Well, I agree with you too. Something isn't good just because it is, but it is because it is. And if your goal is to is into the future, then ising is good enough to is.
Since he did bring up determinism, I actually wrote this down and for one of my questions. With people that take the determined or super determined approach to, humans and the universe in general, I think there's a quote that's, the humans are the gods, are the playthings of the gods, right? And a lot of mythology is humans are doing things, because the gods are manipulating them in some way. We don't really have our own love. Cupid just hits us with the arrow, so on and so forth, right? So, I mean, essentially, that's the same argument come full circle, just without the gods or story behind it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've said that 1,000 times. Yeah, blaming the atoms is no different than blaming the gods.
Well, I mean, there's some people that are like want to. It seems to me some people want to mythologize science. I mean, I've heard like I think it's pantheism, right? Or God, and I know Travis would
pantheism.
It's like it's like, well, my God is the fundamental four forces of the universe: nuclear forces like electromagnetism, gravity, and then I know Travis's response would be, well, why call that God?
Mm-hmm.
My response to that is, why are you no longer following science and adding more to it than it really is? That's weird. It's almost an indirect insult to the thing you're professing to believe. That doesn't make any sense. Because as soon as you begin anthropomorphizing the concept of science, you've stepped away from science.
Well, is the strong nuclear force and gravity science, or is that things we've discovered with science and that just is the natural world?
That's what I mean. Like, anthropomorphizing those concepts as God is an indication you're no longer following the data.
Right. So if someone just calls it God and says it's my God because it's the parameters in which I exist, I mean, that's not false, right?
Well, in a sense, it kind of is. To say, I mean, yeah, okay, fine. I can see it. I can see the conception, but at the same time, it's not going to be stereotypically perceived that way, because God is usually loaded with this higher power sort of addendum to it.
Well, that's the problem, is the loaded term, right? I think that if God was not such a loaded term and such a malleable term that means so many different things to so many different people, it wouldn't be a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here, look, I'm gonna go through a few Greek myths. I'll just read some, and y'all tell me what y'all think of them. How about that?
That's a lot of reading. You're gonna just like say the name of the myth?
I'm gonna read the entire book. No. They're very small, like half pages in this book I have.
Good, yeah, cool.
Yeah, the affairs of Aphrodite and the jealousy of Aphrodite. Let's see here.
Aphrodite.
ZMO?
Yes.
It kind of sounds like the noise that we're hearing is actually backfeed. It's only happening when other people talk.
Okay.
Just letting you know.
I don't know how to fix that.
Turn your volume down.
Turn my volume down? Oh.
I'm gonna step away, but thanks for the stream.
Can I touch on what Doctor and what Grim was saying before? Grim was saying that the religion is used to an extreme to do horrible things, and I was always thinking, like, why would that be? I could understand, like, a person like a leader wanting to keep power in having people believe what they want them to believe, and that I guess that would make sense to not have to have society structured in a way in order to keep it. And but the doctor said sometimes, like, it's a good thing, like you the way that the society is at the time, that was just the best way that they can get by, so it's not necessarily bad, in doing horrible, in doing things that seemed bad in killing.
Yeah, let me put words in your mouth. It might seem bad to you now, given where you're at, but at the time, did they have any way of seeing a better solution?
I see. So we're seeing things from a different time, and judging it is not right. It's
a different time. It's a different set of environmental constraints around which you've formed your own morality, and your own concept of what's good and what's bad. But what's good to someone 2,000 years ago might have been just making enough babies so that you don't die off entirely. Like that might have been the best thing. And
okay, so I'm taking
right
my
now,
present
like 1.2 babies is probably the right amount to have now for everybody.
Yeah, so I'm taking my present mind and I'm applying it to the past, where people were they thought differently at the time.
Yeah, so they had a totally different set of environmental constraints of what worries them, what's going to make them happy, what's going to make them comfortable. They had a totally different set of environmental constraints, and then the optimal solution to your problem of how to live depends on not just your environmental constraints, but also,
how culture is structured, how society's cultural norms are structured.
All the boundary conditions, right? All the things that
and religion upholds religion upholds that, and anybody does anything that doesn't go along with it, they're ostracized, because which would be a logical thing, because that person is upsetting the balance, right? They're doing things that don't go along cultural norms that uphold society to function properly, right? So it would make sense if a person was living differently and not conforming to how society is, and there's you're trying to bring in a behavior that is dangerous because society functions by upholding these norms, and you going against that is a threat.
Potentially, it's potentially a threat, and it might be something where you have to break down.
Oh, it might be good, but they wouldn't know that.
You might have to kill the animal and build your society on its remains.
Or it might be good, but they wouldn't know that, because we, judging from the future, have a different perspective than a person living at that time. So there's no way they would know if a person being open to different views, that could be a threat to society, that's trying to uphold cultural norms to maintain for things to run right.
Yeah.
So the argument is, so it's just a question in change versus conservatism, right?
No, it's not just that. No, it's not just that.
So I shouldn't use the word. So sometimes it would make sense for you to change, right? But sometimes it would make sense for you to not do that. But you have to figure out whether that is the case or not. And it's a conversation that's being had.
That's right. Yeah, there's always a destructive force.
It's like stop and go. There's times you should step on the gas. There's times you should step on the brakes, right?
Well, you kind of have to figure out. Well, think about this. If you want to build the tallest structure, like, can you always just go up? Or at some point you go up and you realize that's as far up as you can go with the rules that you built that structure with, and you have to tear it all down and start building again with a different set of rules. Right? Now, if there's a bunch of people in society that think they haven't gone as high as they can with the current rules, or if they're happy with how high they've built their tower, then they're going to resist you changing the rules. But if you get as high as you can, then there's going to be more people that want to change the rules so you can build higher.
If somebody brings a logical argument for change. Does that not mean anything, or because you're having it's about the conversations. People say, well, people didn't know any better in the time, but people had arguments in the past, and I'm sure some people were reasoning for things to change, and change against people who didn't want that. You're to come to a conclusion on whether or not which one is right. So I mean, like, you're trying to see the potential of how things could come about that's positive. So you're gonna have to make a prediction in whether you're to change or not, or to be.
Yeah. I think you're on the right track there, Nevik, but I want to hear the ZMO's story. He's got a story. He wanted to read us one of the stories, and I want to hear that.
I'm just trying to find. All right, I'll just check on this one. Okay, so this was a central one in Europe. So y'all were saying it was bad when I was talking, or is it better now? Okay.
No, there was a rap or something going on in the background with like some kind of rhythmic bass that was activating your microphone, but like you couldn't hear anything.
Boom, 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 it's not that bad.
It's actually bad. Not bad.
So this one is central to Europe, and I'm sure y'all were all heard of King Arthur. This is primarily from Britain. It says some of the most enduring European myths are those of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Arthur was a mythical king, but his character may have been based on a British military leader of the Dark Ages. The stories tell how he ruled an ideal, chivalrous court at his castle Camelot, of his knight's quest to find the Holy Grail, and of how the king's court finally broke up because of the treachery of Arthur's son, Mordred. Plot synopsis: Arthur becomes king. Arthur was the illegitimate son of Uther Pendragon, a British king, and Queen Ygerne of Cornwall, and as a consequence was brought up in secret. Before he died, Uther embedded a sword in a block of stone in London and said that whoever could remove the sword could become the king of the Britons. None of the knights who ever tried could ever move the sword in the stone until Arthur pulled out the sword with ease, so becoming king. He later broke the sword in a duel with a giant, and the wizard Merlin took him to the watery home of the Lady of the Lake, from which a hand appeared holding another sword called Excalibur, which Arthur took. Yeah, that's about all I got right here.
That's a good one. There's a damn lot of stories about that.
Yeah, King Arthur's interesting. I mean, just King Arthur, you could do probably an hour to 2 hour podcast. I mean, I don't know. To me, it sounds a lot like I don't know. It kind of sounds similar to what's the name of that Norse myth? There was that movie
Grendel,
about
the
it.
The one with Grendel.
Yeah.
Monster
That
Grendel.
one. Yeah. Fucking Beowulf.
Well, no. So Arthur is more like King Arthur is more like
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's wherever my.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, King Arthur is a great example of one of those legends or myths, if you want to call it, where there's obviously some historical basis, but then you throw in some storytelling and some mysticism, and it becomes something that's really quite a compelling story for people to make plays and movies and books about. And so we pass on this mythology, right? And to a large extent, it extends to changing the culture of England, where it's like this kid was destined to become the king, and so there's all these metaphysical things going on in the world that conspire to make him the king, right? Like the sword in the stone, like how would you put a sword in the stone? Is that real? Like, yeah, obviously that's fictional, I think, to anyone in the modern day. Like, there's not really any way to like put a sword in the stone so that a kid can take it out if he's the right kid, but not a big strong guy.
And also the fact he was an illegitimate son. It seems like from this book I've read, there's a lot of illegitimate sons. I think
a lot of illegitimate sons in Britain. Yeah.
Mythology as well, like Hercules, I believe was an illegitimate son.
Well, he was definitely floated down the river in a basket. I don't know if he was illegitimate or not.
Talking while muted. It's the best way to communicate. Very important to that story, though, is that his uncle put the sword in the stone. It doesn't necessarily have to be stone. It could have been sandstone made from concrete and sand.
Yeah. Okay.
So
or it could have been like it could have been a bowl of weed, and the stone is just like he's getting stoned.
That took me way too long to put together.
I'm just saying there's all kinds of ways you can interpret it, but really it's obviously fiction, because you have to interpret it in a way that you suspend disbelief to believe any of it.
So sure, the other thing too, though, is if just so everyone's aware, unless it has a very particular type of fuller, any blade you put in stone would actually be really easy to remove because it's just a really long taper. Like you'd have to intentionally make the blade hard to remove. A normal sword
would be rough. Yeah, it would be rough. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it would be rough to put a blade into something and not be able to take it out unless there was some like twisting binding effect, like like a saw in a tree. If you've ever tried to saw down a tree.
Yeah, you get a blade stuck in a tree, that'd be way harder.
But stabbing a sword in something and pulling it out in the vertical direction probably not going to be as difficult as the story makes it out to be. So it's obviously, it's obviously fantastical, right?
I mean, I've done pulled rebar out of concrete.
And this is the nature of. I mean, this is the nature of mythology. It's fantastical to the point that most of the reasonable people aren't going to think that it's grounded in reality. In fact,
I'm actually really interested in the story of Arthur just because of when it arose and how old the story must actually be. It must have spent quite a long time purely in the verbal, purely in
a few hundred years at least, right? Purely in verbal tradition.
Had to have been, because Christianity came to that region at the late Roman period. So the